"Hey, Blackie, go serve!" The words split the air like glass under pressure. Every head in the grand hall turned. Chandeliers trembled with laughter that wasn't kind, and somewhere between the marble columns and the polished silver trays, a young woman's dignity hung in the silence that followed. Her name was Maya Carter, 23, political science graduate, daughter of Robert Carter, CEO of Carter Industries, the conglomerate minutes away from sealing a $750 million partnership with the Bennett family, the same family, now laughing at her like she was hired help. If you have ever watched arrogance fold into regret in real time, stay here, because what happens in the next few minutes will remind you why power never raises its voice. Now, let's rewind. The gala was a celebration of legacy money. Crystal glasses, tuxedos, strings in the background playing Bach, and 1,000 unspoken rules about who belonged. Maya was not dressed for their approval, simple black dress, natural hair, small gold hoops. She carried herself with quiet grace, not the practiced arrogance that filled the room. When she stepped aside to take a call near the catering staff, the Bennett matriarch mistook her composure for servitude. "Hey, Blackie, go serve," she barked, the words sharp enough to silence the music for half a beat. The others around her, the son, the daughter-in-law, the patriarch in a silver suit, laughed as if cruelty was part of the evening program. Maya didn't move. She didn't cry. She didn't even blink. The only thing she did was raise her phone back to her ear. "Dad," she said quietly, her voice steady as a heartbeat. "Cancel the deal. Now." "Oh." Robert Carter, standing in a boardroom across the city with executives waiting for his signature, froze. "What happened?" "Just trust me," Maya replied. "End it, before the ink touches paper." Back in the hall, the laughter carried on, echoing like the clinking of empty glasses. None of them noticed the shift in Maya's posture, the stillness before consequence. To them, she was just another face in the background. To the cameras, she was calm. But to the billions watching later, she would become the moment arrogance met its owner. The Bennetts would discover, in a matter of seconds, that the young woman they mocked was not the help, she was the heir. And the contract that promised them $750 million? It was already disintegrating, one quiet command at a time. The Bennett Gala was supposed to be perfect. Held inside the Westbrook Museum of Fine Arts, every inch of the marble floor gleamed as if money itself had polished it. Waiters moved like choreography in black vests, carrying champagne that caught the chandelier light in liquid gold. The air smelled of lilies, caviar, and arrogance. At the center of the hall stood the Bennett family, old wealth wrapped in new smiles. Richard Bennett, 70 years old, silver hair, silver cufflinks, silver tongue. His wife, Eleanor, draped in navy velvet, diamonds bright enough to challenge the ceiling lights. Their two children, Austin and Claire, flawless in the way privilege often appears confident without curiosity. Tonight was meant to mark the final step of a historic merger. Carter Industries and Bennett Holdings joining forces to build the largest renewable infrastructure group in the country, $750 million. 5 years of negotiation, one signature away. But beneath the elegance, something fragile trembled. Because prejudice does not die in suits and gowns, it hides there, waiting for its cue. Maya Carter arrived quietly, a guest of honor who chose not to announce herself. She had been raised that way. Power does not need introduction, her father used to say. She walked through the museum's glass doors with a simple clutch, black dress, and calm eyes. Her presence drew no attention, and that was the point. From her place near the bar, she observed how people looked at her politely at first, then longer than politeness allowed. Their glances were not curious. They were calculating, as if they were trying to place her. Guest? Staff? A +1 who wandered too far from her table? A pianist played in the corner. The melody floated, elegant but cold. Conversation hummed like bees circling honey they did not plan to share. Then came the first glance from Eleanor Bennett, the kind of look that appraises rather than greets. Her laughter, seconds later, was too loud for the size of her smile. She leaned toward her son and whispered something that made his mouth twist into an amused smirk. The daughter followed with a laugh soft enough to sound harmless but sharp enough to wound. They did not know who Maya was. They did not care. They saw a young black woman in a simple dress at their table of power and assumed she was there to serve it. Maya felt the weight of their gaze, the same weight she had felt 100 times before college receptions, corporate parties, even in elevators where silence grew heavy with judgment. But tonight, she decided not to flinch. She wanted to witness, to remember every detail. A server passed by, offering champagne. She shook her head politely. That was when Eleanor spoke, voice slicing through the air like ice cracking on glass. "Hey, Blackie, go serve." The sound traveled across marble and conversation like an explosion wrapped in laughter. A few guests turned, unsure if they heard correctly. Others looked down, pretending to sip their drinks, trying to vanish into safety. For a heartbeat, even the pianist hesitated. Maya turned her head slowly, the calm of generations in her eyes. She said nothing. Her phone vibrated once in her hand. The screen flashed. "Dad, Robert Carter." She answered, her voice steady. "Cancel the deal now." Yeah. A few people nearby overheard the words, though none of them understood what they meant. They saw only a young woman making a phone call, not realizing she had just detonated the invisible foundation beneath their empire. Across the city, Robert Carter looked out the window of his office on the 42nd floor. The city lights stretched endlessly, like a map of every deal he had ever made. His pen hovered over the contract. "Maya," he said, "what happened?" "Something you cannot unhear," she replied. "End it before they regret the ink." Back at the gala, Eleanor Bennett chuckled. "These girls," she said to her friends, "so dramatic these days." Her laughter drew more laughter. The echo was ugly. But the atmosphere had changed. Subtly, dangerously. The air no longer shimmered with comfort, it hummed with consequence. The head of security noticed the way Maya stood. Not angry, not fearful, anchored. A young woman surrounded by people who had no idea their names were already falling off contracts and portfolios. Near the bar, a journalist from Financial World Weekly watched, curiosity in her eyes. She had seen the Bennett family's arrogance before. Something about the scene felt different, too sharp, too deliberate. She lifted her camera slightly. The first photo would later become the headline seen around the world. Maya adjusted her grip on the phone, whispered something almost like a prayer, then placed it back into her purse. From the outside, she appeared still. But stillness is often the shape of control. Eleanor, sensing her authority return, laughed again, tossing her hair. "These charity events attract all kinds," she said. "Some people just wander in." No one replied. Not because they agreed, but because they had all started to feel something else, shame creeping through the seams of luxury. The chandeliers still glowed. The pianist kept playing. Yet, beneath it all, an invisible countdown had begun. Maya exhaled slowly, eyes steady on the family that mocked her. They thought the room belonged to them. They were wrong. The air had already shifted hands. Robert Carter had built empires from silence. In his world, noise was for the insecure. Calm was currency. His daughter had learned that language long before she learned to write her name. At 9 years old, Maya watched her father walk out of a boardroom after being mistaken for the driver. He had not shouted. He had not demanded an apology. He simply returned to his office, made a single call, and by the next morning, the company that had mocked him was bought, audited, and dissolved within a month. Never argue with arrogance, he told her. Buy it and teach it humility. That lesson lived quietly in Maya's bones. Tonight, as she stood in the shimmering noise of the Bennett Gala, her pulse stayed steady. The insult that might have shattered someone else became data collected, stored, processed. Every detail mattered. The tilt of Eleanor Bennett's chin, the smirk of her son Austin, the nervous half-smile of their daughter Claire, who laughed but looked away too soon. Maya had inherited her father's precision. She understood people the way he understood numbers, patterns, motives, leverage, and she knew what would happen when that call she made reached the Carter boardroom. Robert Carter looked across the polished mahogany table at a half-dozen lawyers, advisors, and directors. His voice was calm but absolute. "No one signs. We terminate the Bennett deal immediately. Send word to finance, to legal, and to the media relations team. I will handle the statement myself." One of the advisors blinked. "Sir, that would end 5 years of negotiation. Are you certain?" Robert leaned forward, eyes sharp as flint. "My daughter said cancel it. That is certainty enough." Back at the museum, Maya remained still while conversation resumed around her like nothing had happened. Yet nothing was the same. Whispers began to flicker through the hall like static electricity. The Bennett family's laughter had grown brittle, stretched too thin over discomfort. A man in a dark blue suit approached Maya cautiously. "Miss, are you all right?" he asked, unsure whether to intervene or stay safe behind politeness. She turned to him, voice low but clear. "I am fine, but this room is about to learn the cost of comfort." The man frowned, not understanding. Then he stepped away, instinctively checking his phone as if expecting an alert that would soon come. At the far end of the hall, a massive digital screen displayed the company's logos side by side, Carter Industries and Bennett Holdings. It cycled through press images, investor highlights, and phrases like "innovation through unity." Guests applauded at intervals, unaware that unity had just expired. In the control booth behind the stage, a technician received a push notification on his tablet. "Urgent. Cancel presentation. CEO directive." He hesitated, reading the line twice. Then he watched as the corporate logo on his monitor blinked out for a fraction of a second. The air changed again. Eleanor Bennett, oblivious, was retelling the incident to a cluster of guests, her tone dripping with false amusement. "You would not believe it. The girl actually answered her phone like she was giving orders." Austin chuckled. "Maybe she is one of those online influencers trying to go viral." Claire smiled faintly but said nothing. Her eyes stayed fixed on Maya, the only person in the hall who seemed completely unbothered. Maya's phone buzzed once more. A single text appeared. From Dad. Message: "It is done." She exhaled, slow and controlled, as the weight of inevitability settled around her. The journalist from Financial World Weekly noticed the shift. She saw Maya glance at her phone, saw the slight curve of a knowing smile, and knew a story was brewing. She raised her camera again. The shutter clicked once, soft as a heartbeat. A few guests near the Bennett family began whispering. The screen behind them had gone dark. Then it lit up again, but this time only one logo appeared. Carter Industries. The audience murmured. Eleanor frowned, tapping her husband's arm. "Richard, what is this?" Richard Bennett turned to the nearest staff member. "Technical glitch. Fix it." But the technician was already speaking into his headset, voice shaking. "Sir, this is not a glitch. The presentation has been terminated by corporate order." The words rippled across the room like an unseen breeze. Heads turned. Conversations stilled. Every sound, the clink of a glass, the scrape of a chair, sounded louder in the vacuum that followed. Maya remained perfectly still. She had become the quiet center of a storm that no one else could yet see. Richard forced a smile, trying to reclaim control. "Ladies and gentlemen, small technical difficulties. Nothing to worry about." But worry had already taken root. Investors checked their phones. Notifications started to appear. Bennett merger canceled. Carter Industries withdraws from joint venture. Market reacts to sudden collapse. Eleanor's laugh faltered. "This cannot be happening," she whispered. Maya turned her gaze toward her and said softly, "It already did." The pianist stopped playing. The music ended mid-note, leaving the air bare and heavy. Richard Bennett's phone rang. He answered quickly, forcing a grin for the audience. But his expression changed within seconds, color draining, posture sinking. The call ended, and for the first time in decades, the patriarch of the Bennett family looked small. Across the hall, the journalist lowered her camera and whispered to herself, "This is history." Maya took one final look at the family that had mocked her. She said nothing more, because the lesson had already spoken. Power does not need to shout. The chandeliers still glimmered above, but their light no longer belonged to the Bennetts. It belonged to the silence that followed her out the door. The hush that followed was not ordinary silence. It was the kind that arrives after something sacred breaks. Conversations that had once floated with champagne laughter now stumbled into whispers and side glances. Every guest could feel it, though no one could yet name it, the unease of witnessing power shift hands without a single shout. Maya Carter stood in the center of it all. Her shoulders were still, her breath even, but her eyes, those calm, steady eyes, held the weight of her father's legacy. Around her, the gala continued in fragments. Waiters tried to keep moving. Musicians exchanged nervous looks. Even the chandeliers seemed dimmer, as if the light itself had chosen to lower its voice. Eleanor Bennett broke first. "Richard," she hissed, "do something." Her husband's face had already turned the color of ash. He had spent a lifetime mastering control of deals, of rooms, of outcomes. But control cannot survive exposure, and the room had begun to see him clearly for the first time. Near the bar, a cluster of investors whispered fiercely, glancing at their phones. One read a breaking alert aloud, his voice trembling. Carter Industries confirms withdrawal from the Bennett partnership. Statement pending. Another guest gasped. A third muttered, "That cannot be true. Not tonight." Eleanor's voice rose just enough to cut through the hum. "Who is she? Who does she think she is, walking in here and causing this circus?" Maya turned her head slightly, meeting Eleanor's eyes. There was no malice, no anger, only a kind of quiet sadness that made the insult echo louder. "You do not recognize me," Maya said evenly. "That is the problem." The journalist who had been watching stepped forward, notebook in hand. "Excuse me, miss. May I ask, are you connected to the Carter delegation?" Her tone was careful, respectful, aware that she was standing on history's edge. Maya did not answer immediately. She looked around first at the tables lined with untouched hors d'oeuvres, at the art hanging above heads that had forgotten what beauty meant, at the guests pretending they had seen nothing. Then she spoke softly, each word deliberate. "Connected? No. I am the continuation." The journalist's pen froze. Across the room, Austin Bennett's arrogance cracked into disbelief. "Wait," he said, voice high with shock. "You are telling me you are Carter's daughter? That call—" "Was to my father," Maya said. "And yes, he listens." Eleanor stepped forward, trying to recover dignity through volume. "This is absurd. You cannot just walk into a gala and sabotage a $750 million contract because of a misunderstanding." Maya's gaze didn't move. "You call it a misunderstanding. I call it recognition delayed." A low murmur rippled through the crowd. Someone whispered, "She is his daughter. The deal is gone." Another voice followed, "She is the reason. She is the one." The pianist, unsure whether to continue or not, let his fingers hover above the keys, the silence between notes stretching like glass about to shatter. Richard Bennett finally found his voice, though it came out hoarse. "Young lady," he said, "you have no idea what you have done tonight." Maya's answer was immediate, calm, absolute. "I do. I have preserved my father's integrity and ended your illusion of it." For a moment, the room froze completely. Even the air felt paused. Then, in that fragile stillness, a sound emerged, the faint, sharp click of cameras. The journalist was not the only one capturing history anymore. Dozens of guests had raised their phones, recording the moment the Bennett's empire began to crumble. Eleanor Bennett's hand trembled as she reached for a flute of champagne. The glass slipped, crashed onto the marble, and shattered. The sound rang out like a verdict. Maya did not flinch. Security personnel appeared near the entrance, uncertain whom they were supposed to protect. One of them whispered into his earpiece, waiting for instruction that never came. The hierarchy of the room had dissolved faster than anyone could process. From the balcony above, the museum's event manager looked down in disbelief. He had hosted senators, actors, and royalty, but he had never seen silence command an entire crowd like this. Maya took one small step forward, her heels echoing softly against the marble. The sound seemed to fill the hall like a drumbeat. "You built your empire on assumption," she said. "You assumed the world still looked at you with awe. You assumed a young black woman in a simple dress could not stand on the same marble as you. You assumed wrong." Eleanor's mouth opened, but no words came. Maya continued, her tone like tempered steel. "Tonight is not about revenge. It is about revelation. You have shown everyone here exactly who you are and who we are not." The journalist whispered, "This is bigger than business." Richard Bennett sank into the nearest chair, phone buzzing endlessly in his hand. The news had spread too quickly for him to contain. Stock analysts, reporters, and rival executives were already dissecting the event online. His company's future was slipping away in real time, visible to anyone holding a screen. Eleanor tried one last time to reclaim control. "You think this makes you powerful?" she spat. "You think you win because you ruined us?" Maya shook her head slowly. "No, I do not win because you lose. I win because I did not become you." Her voice carried through the entire hall, steady, unbroken, final. No one clapped. No one dared to. But in the silence that followed, the truth stood taller than every statue in the museum. When Maya turned to leave, the crowd parted instinctively, creating a clear path toward the glass doors. She walked past them without haste, her footsteps marking the end of an era that had believed itself untouchable. Behind her, The Bennets sat amid the ruins of their grandeur, silver, velvet, and pride, all dulled by the reflection of what they had just lost. The chandeliers flickered once, twice, and then steadied, casting a colder light over the hall. The echo of that broken glass lingered long after Maya had gone, like the sound of arrogance collapsing under its own weight. Outside the museum, the night air felt cleaner, cooler, as if the city itself had been holding its breath through the storm. The hum of traffic returned in distant layers, cars, faint horns, the rhythm of a city that never really sleeps. Maya Carter stepped down the marble staircase with the same composure she had walked in with. To the bystanders gathered near the valet entrance, she looked like any other guest leaving early from a high society gala. Only the stillness in her stride hinted at what she had just done. Her phone vibrated once more. It was her father. She answered before the second ring. "Dad," she said quietly. Robert Carter's voice was steady but gentler now. "You did not hesitate." "I learned from you," Maya replied. "I knew what to do before I knew why I was doing it." For a few seconds, neither of them spoke. The bond between them was built not on words, but on the understanding of what silence can mean when you carry generations of it. "Maya," Robert said finally, "you handled it better than I could have. But are you all right?" "Yes," she said. "I am just remembering." And she was. The cool air of the present melted into the memory of another room, another insult, another test of belonging. She was 12 years old, standing in the lobby of a 5-star hotel in Atlanta, wearing a white dress and her Sunday shoes. Her father had gone to park the car. The clerk behind the front desk looked at her and frowned. "This area is for guests only," he said sharply. "You cannot stand here." "I am waiting for my father," she had said politely. The man's expression hardened. "Then wait outside." She had stepped out to the curb, clutching her small purse, watching through the glass as the lobby lights reflected off her face. She had felt invisible then, not because no one saw her, but because they chose not to. When her father returned, she said nothing. But that night, she heard him on the phone. His voice was calm, always calm as he spoke to the regional director. The next day, the clerk no longer worked there. That was the first time Maya understood that silence could be both weapon and armor. Now, years later, standing under the museum's golden archway, she understood it fully. What had happened tonight was not new. It was inherited, repeated, perfected. Robert's voice broke through her memory. "The news is everywhere," he said. "They are already calling it the fastest corporate collapse in years. The Bennets will try to reach out tomorrow. They will apologize publicly. They will say it was a misunderstanding." Maya looked up at the glowing city skyline, her reflection faint in the glass door beside her. "They already did this once, Dad. The only misunderstanding is thinking they can erase it again." "Do you want me to make a statement?" Robert asked. She shook her head even though he could not see it. "No, let the silence speak for us. Everyone in that room knows what happened. That is enough." "Oh." Inside, the museum's glass walls reflected fragments of the chaos left behind. Guests were leaving in uneasy clusters, their faces pale with the awareness that they had just witnessed a reckoning. Security guards spoke in low voices near the broken champagne glass. The journalist from Financial World Weekly stood near the exit, typing furiously, her mind already crafting the headline that would echo across the morning feeds. She would write about the power of dignity, about how one calm voice can end what 1,000 loud ones could not. But she would not know the part of the story that mattered most, the memory of the little girl standing outside that hotel lobby years ago, learning that exclusion was never personal. It was systemic. It was a language people learned to speak without realizing they were fluent in it. Maya stepped toward her car as the valet approached nervously, holding the keys like they were holy. "Your car, Miss Carter," he said softly. She took them with a smile that was kind but distant. "Thank you." He hesitated. "Everyone inside is talking about you." "They should be talking about themselves," she replied. He nodded, unsure what else to say, and returned to his post. As the car door closed behind her, the noise of the city softened. The world outside the tinted window moved in slow-motion streetlights bending across the windshield, shadows of pedestrians fading into night. Her mind replayed the moment again, not for satisfaction, but for understanding. The insult had been simple, almost primitive in its cruelty. Yet what destroyed the Bennets was not her anger, it was their assumption. They had not been defeated by a raised voice or a viral video. They had been undone by their own blindness, by the quiet precision of someone who refused to shout. The car turned onto the boulevard. On the radio, a news anchor's voice was already breaking the story. Carter Industries has officially withdrawn from its merger with Bennett Holdings, citing ethical misalignment. Market analysts predict major fallout by morning. Sources say the decision was made during tonight's gala event. Maya turned the volume down. She did not need to hear their speculation. She had already lived the truth. At a red light, she caught her reflection in the rearview mirror. For a moment, she saw her younger self, the girl outside the hotel, waiting, silent, unseen. "You did not wait this time," she whispered. "You made them see." The light turned green. She drove forward, leaving behind the museum, the laughter, and the history that had finally caught up with itself. And for the first time in her life, the silence around her did not feel heavy. It felt earned. It felt like justice arriving on time. By dawn, the story had already escaped the marble walls of the museum. It traveled through newsrooms, investor forums, social media feeds, and breakfast tables. Headlines appeared in every tone imaginable, some praising, some doubting, all hungry. $750 million deal collapses overnight. Carter heiress shuts down partnership in stunning public twist. Bennett family faces backlash over alleged racial insult. By morning, the city pulsed with the rhythm of speculation. And inside the Bennett penthouse, the rhythm was panic. Richard Bennett sat at the head of a long glass dining table. His suit jacket hung on the back of a chair, and his tie was undone for the first time anyone could remember. The table was covered not with breakfast, but with devices, phones, tablets, a laptop still open to a live broadcast. Every few seconds, another alert chimed, another email arrived, another reputation crumbled. Across from him, Eleanor Bennett was pacing barefoot on the marble floor, clutching her phone like a weapon. Her voice trembled with outrage. "This cannot be the end. We will sue. We will demand an apology. We will tell the press it was taken out of context." Richard did not look up. "You do not sue integrity," he said quietly. "You lose to it." Austin Bennett slammed his fist on the table. "We cannot let them control the narrative. That girl humiliated us in front of everyone." "That girl," Richard snapped, finally raising his head, "owns what we were trying to buy." Oh. The silence that followed was worse than shouting. Claire Bennett stood by the window, her reflection pale in the morning light. "Mom," she said softly, "you did call her that word." Eleanor froze. Her grip on the phone tightened. "I was joking," she said, but even she did not believe the words. Meanwhile, across the city, in the Carter residence overlooking Lake Washington, calm reigned. Robert Carter stood on the balcony with a cup of black coffee, eyes fixed on the water. He had been awake all night, reading reports, answering statements, measuring the waves of reaction, but none of it worried him. For the first time in decades, the truth did not need defending. Maya joined him quietly, wrapped in a gray sweater, her hair still tied back from the night before. "They are spiraling," she said softly. He nodded once. "They will turn on each other before noon. Pride always eats itself first." She smiled faintly. "Should I make a statement?" "Not yet," Robert said. "Let them fill the silence with excuses. When they have exhausted every lie, that is when the truth sounds loudest." Inside the house, the television was already replaying footage from the gala. Clips from guests' phones were everywhere now. Eleanor's voice, the laughter, the shattered glass, and Maya's calm face walking through the hall as if through history. On one news channel, a panel of commentators debated endlessly. "She overreacted," one said. "You do not destroy a business deal over a single word." Another replied sharply, "You do when that word carries 400 years of meaning." The conversation spread faster than facts, and somewhere between the arguments, people began to take sides. In restaurants, offices, and living rooms, strangers were saying her name sometimes with admiration, sometimes with resentment. But her name was no longer unknown, Maya Carter. It carried the weight of every quiet injustice that had ever been overlooked, and the calm defiance that finally ended one. By mid-morning, the Bennett Board of Directors had gathered in emergency session. The atmosphere was suffocating. Lawyers shuffled through crisis statements, while investors demanded explanations. The company's stock had dropped 12% in 4 hours. One executive finally broke the silence. "We need a response video. Mrs. Bennett should apologize on camera." Eleanor looked up sharply. I will not grovel before that woman. Do you hear me? I will not. Richard exhaled heavily. You will, because if you do not, we will lose everything. For a moment, no one spoke. The walls seemed to close in around them, the same kind of walls that had always protected them from consequence, now turning into mirrors they could not escape. Back at the Carter home, Robert received a call from his media consultant. The public is split, sir. Some are applauding your daughter, others are calling her impulsive. What should we tell the press? Robert glanced at Maya, who was sitting by the window reading quietly. Tell them nothing, he said. Tell them she does not need their approval. The consultant hesitated. And the Bennetts? They will issue a statement soon, Robert said calmly. It will sound rehearsed, hollow, and too late. That will be their punishment. And he was right. By noon, every major network streamed the Bennett's press conference live. Eleanor sat beside her husband, posture rigid, makeup heavy, eyes tired. She read from a sheet of paper she did not write. We are deeply sorry for the misunderstanding that occurred during last night's event. Our words were never intended to cause harm or offense. Her voice wavered on the word misunderstanding. The cameras zoomed closer. Millions watching knew exactly what they were seeing, not remorse, but desperation dressed in designer silk. Maya watched the broadcast in silence. Her father stood behind her, arms crossed. Do you want to respond now? He asked. She shook her head. The world just heard the difference between sincerity and survival. No statement can compete with that. Outside, the sun had climbed high enough to light the water until it looked like silver in motion. Maya stepped onto the balcony again, breathing deeply. People keep saying I canceled a deal, she said quietly. But that is not what happened. Robert looked at her. Then what did happen? I just refused to sell dignity, she replied. The words lingered between them, warm and cold at the same time. Somewhere in the city, the Bennett's apology continued to loop on every screen, dissected by analysts, mocked by commentators, and archived by the internet forever. But here, in the stillness of morning, Maya Carter's calm remained unshaken. She had not destroyed a legacy. She had corrected it. And as the day unfolded, a new question began to spread through every newsroom and every boardroom. If silence can end a $750 million deal in one night, what else can it change? That evening, the world was still replaying the same 30-second clip, Eleanor Bennett's voice echoing through the marble hall, the word that cut the air and the calm that followed it. Every network had its version. Every platform had its opinion. But in a small apartment above a bookstore in downtown Seattle, a young woman named Evelyn Shaw watched the footage on her cracked phone screen with her hand over her mouth. Evelyn was not rich. She was not powerful. But she had been there. She was one of the catering assistants hired for the gala. She had carried champagne, cleared tables, smiled when people ignored her. And she had seen the whole thing unfold from less than 10 feet away. Now, as she watched the replay online, she realized what she had witnessed was not just an insult, it was a turning point. She opened her laptop and began to write. Her post was simple, not polished, but true. I was at the gala last night. I saw the look on that woman's face when she said those words. It was not a joke. It was hate disguised as humor. And I saw Maya Carter stay calm when every part of me wanted her to scream. That calm was not weakness. It was control. It was grace. She changed something in that room, and I will never forget it. She hit post and went to make tea, not realizing her words would travel faster than any press release. Within hours, her message had been shared thousands of times, then hundreds of thousands. By midnight, her post appeared on national news segments under the headline, "Eyewitness confirms Bennett remarks were intentional." The narrative shifted again. This time, the silence was no longer being debated, it was being understood. Across the city, in a dimly lit control room at a major news studio, producers scrambled to keep up. They looped Evelyn's post into their broadcast, adding her testimony to the reel of phone footage. For the first time, Maya Carter's composure was being discussed not as overreaction, but as strategy. She knew exactly what she was doing, one anchor said on air. She did not have to raise her voice. She let the truth record itself. The comment section exploded with emotion. Some viewers called her a hero. Others accused the media of dramatizing race for ratings. But amid the noise, a pattern formed a slow, steady awakening. The next morning, Evelyn received a call from an unknown number. A calm, professional voice said, "Miss Shaw, this is Nia Thompson. Executive Assistant to Robert Carter. Mr. Carter would like to thank you for speaking truth when it was not convenient. Evelyn nearly dropped her phone. I just said what I saw. That is exactly why it matters, Nia replied. Carter Industries stands by every word you wrote. If you are willing, we would like to offer you something. Offer me? Yes, Nia said. An opportunity. Mr. Carter believes integrity should not cost someone their job. The catering company you worked for was subcontracted by the Bennetts. We understand they are currently suspending staff for speaking to the press. Evelyn froze. They fired people? They are calling it downsizing, Nia said, voice dry. But we would like to hire you. Corporate communications. Truth, after all, is the foundation of every brand. Evelyn sank into her chair, tears forming behind her eyes. Please tell him. Thank you. When the call ended, she sat for a long time staring at her phone, realizing her life had just turned. Meanwhile, in the Carter home, Maya stood by the window watching the city lights ripple across the water. Her phone buzzed with a message from Nia. The first witness has spoken. Maya typed back, not the last. She turned to her father, who was seated at his desk, reviewing a flood of incoming reports. It has started, she said softly. Robert nodded without surprise. Truth moves faster than lies once it is given a voice. I told you people would see it for what it was. Evelyn saw it first, Maya said, and she was brave enough to say it. He looked up at her, pride in his eyes. Courage is contagious. You gave her the spark. She carried it forward. Maya exhaled slowly, thinking about the chain of moments that had brought them here, the insult, the call, the silence, and now the witness. Each step had been quiet, deliberate, inevitable. Across the world, conversations were changing tone. Universities were discussing corporate accountability. Talk shows were asking questions about what power should look like. In every thread, in every panel, one sentence from Evelyn's post kept returning. That calm was not weakness. It was control. At the Bennett headquarters, the mood grew darker. Lawyers warned of lawsuits. Investors fled. The family's PR team tried to craft a narrative of misunderstanding, but the witness's words had closed that door. There was no misunderstanding, left only memory. Inside her penthouse, Eleanor Bennett sat before a mirror, her reflection unrecognizable. Why did she not just yell at me? She whispered to herself. If she had yelled, people would have understood me better. Richard, weary and broken, replied quietly from the next room. Because yelling would have made her one of us. That night, Evelyn's post reached 1 million shares. People across America wrote their own stories under her thread, memories of being judged, dismissed, ignored, or doubted because of who they were. It became more than a story about a deal. It became a mirror for an entire country. And somewhere in that quiet, Maya Carter looked at her phone again. She scrolled through the comments, her eyes soft but unreadable. One comment stood out. She reminded me that silence is not surrender, it is strategy. Maya locked her phone and whispered to herself, exactly. Outside, the city's skyline flickered like a pulse. In the space between scandal and justice, something new had begun to breathe. It was not just about a $750 million deal anymore. It was about the quiet that makes the world listen. The boardroom of Carter Industries was never meant to feel tense. It was a place of precision, of polished oak tables and panoramic glass that looked over Lake Washington. Decisions made there shaped markets, not headlines. But on that morning, the atmosphere was heavy, thick with attention. Executives who had once spoken in calm certainty now measured their words as if the air itself might record them. Robert Carter stood at the head of the table. He was composed, immaculate as always, but there was something sharper in his presence, a quiet electricity that made even the most confident men hesitate before speaking. To his right sat his daughter, Maya. She had not planned to attend the emergency board meeting, but she came anyway. The story was no longer just hers. It belonged to the company now, to the brand her father had built from decades of both brilliance and restraint. Let us begin, Robert said. His tone carried the weight of authority and the calm of someone who knew chaos only bends to silence. The head of public relations, a thin woman named Marissa Blake, cleared her throat. Sir, the story has gone global. The Carter name is trending across every platform. 92% of mentions are positive, but 12% of those include references to potential reverse discrimination. The Bennett's allies are pushing a narrative that we weaponized race to destroy them. Maya raised an eyebrow. We did not weaponize anything. We defended dignity. Yes, Miss Carter, Marissa said carefully. But perception shapes markets. The media is split. Some are applauding you for standing firm. Others are questioning your motivation. Robert folded his hands. Let them question. Questions keep them watching, and the longer they watch, the clearer the truth becomes. A low murmur moved through the room. Some nodded, others exchanged uneasy looks. The chief financial officer spoke next. Sir, the company's market value rose nearly 7% overnight due to positive brand exposure. But there are also concerns that this incident will redefine us as a social activism brand rather than a technology and infrastructure leader. Maya looked around the table, her gaze steady. You say that like it is a bad thing. The man hesitated. It is not bad. It is unfamiliar. Investors like stability, predictability. Robert smiled faintly. Stability is the illusion comfort sells. We have never been in the business of comfort. The room fell silent again. Maya leaned forward slightly, her voice low but precise. This company exists because you believed innovation could coexist with integrity. What happened at that gala was not a publicity stunt. It was proof of what happens when those two values collide and which one survives. Marissa took a slow breath. Miss Carter, I agree with you, but we should anticipate backlash. Some sponsors are asking if we plan to issue an official statement of reconciliation with the Bennetts. Maya's eyes flashed. Reconciliation with racism? No. Robert placed a steady hand on the table, signaling calm. We will not release anything defensive. The Bennetts have already apologized on camera. We will not dilute their accountability by explaining it for them. Across the table, a junior executive spoke up hesitantly. Mr. Carter, may I suggest something? What if we redirect the conversation? Use this moment to highlight our new diversity and ethics initiative. Show that we are not reactive, we are proactive. Maya studied him. What is your name? Marcus, ma'am. Marcus Hale. Strata Division. Marcus, she said. That is not a bad idea. Robert nodded in agreement. Prepare a draft. Announce that we will launch a global mentorship program for minority entrepreneurs. Make it clear we are building pathways, not press releases. The tension in the room began to shift. Heads lifted. Pens started to move. But beneath the surface, something deeper was happening, a quiet divide forming among those who had built their careers on caution and those who now believed in conviction. Some whispered that the company was becoming political. Others, mostly younger staff, saw it as evolution. After the meeting, Maya stepped out onto the terrace that overlooked the lake. The day was clear, the water still as glass. Behind her, she heard footsteps. It was Marcus. Miss Carter, he said, adjusting his tie nervously. I just wanted to say, I have worked here 5 years. I have seen your father walk into this building and make history more times than I can count. But what you did last night, what you both did, made me believe we are not just building structures, we are building standards. Maya turned slightly, offering a rare smile. Thank you, Marcus. History is made when someone refuses to repeat it. He nodded, the words settling into him like a promise. Inside the building, screens displayed the company's rising metrics, brand engagement, market value, investor confidence. But those numbers could not capture the real shift that was taking place. For the first time in its history, Carter Industries was being defined not by what it built, but by what it stood for. Across town, in a glass tower half empty from panic resignations, the Bennetts were meeting in their own boardroom. The tone could not have been more different. Blame ricocheted off the walls. Legal teams whispered about defamation suits that would never survive discovery. Someone suggested a private meeting with Robert Carter to negotiate peace. Richard Bennett slammed his hand on the table. He will not see me, he said bitterly, and he should not. We burned that bridge with our own match. Eleanor stared out the window, her voice small but clear. She was younger than Claire, she said, and she looked at me like she had already forgiven me. That is what I cannot stand. Her son, pacing behind her, muttered, She will regret humiliating us. But even he did not believe it. Back at Carter Industries, Maya returned to her father's office. He was standing by the window, the lake behind him glowing under the afternoon sunday. You were right, she said. It was never just a deal. It was a test. Robert turned to her, his voice quiet but proud. And you did not just pass it, Maya. You redefined what passing means. She nodded slowly, her reflection merging with his in the glass. Then let us make sure the world learns something from it. Outside, the city moved as if nothing had changed. But inside those walls, the future had already shifted. The line between silence and strength had been redrawn, and this time, it was permanent. The next 48 hours turned the world into a courtroom. Every screen became a witness, every post a verdict. The video from the gala had spread far beyond the borders of the United States. In London, morning shows debated corporate morality. In Johannesburg, news anchors discussed systemic arrogance in business. In Tokyo, headlines translated the story into a single universal truth: power is not measured by volume, but by value. For Maya Carter, the noise was deafening but distant. She did not scroll through social media. She did not answer interview requests. While the world screamed her name, she sat in her father's office, reviewing new proposals for the mentorship program Marcus Hale had suggested. The chaos outside did not belong to her. It was the world's reaction to something the world had not expected: a black woman who ended injustice with composure instead of rage. Still, she knew the tide was turning in both directions. A new kind of voice was rising online. Anonymous accounts, corporate loyalists, and critics of identity politics filled comment sections with venom. They called her privileged, hypocritical, opportunistic. Some said she had weaponized her father's empire to make a personal statement. Others dismissed her as a symbol built for social media consumption. Inside Carter Industries, Nia Thompson monitored the reaction reports. She approached Maya quietly, holding a tablet. "We are trending in 97 countries," she said. "Positive engagement remains higher than negative, but the opposition is getting louder." Maya looked up from the paperwork. "Loudness is not the same as strength." "I know," Nia said, "but you might want to see this." She handed over the tablet. On the screen was a live broadcast of an independent talk show. A panel of guests sat around a glossy table, their faces lit by studio lights. The host, a sharp-tongued media figure, was mid-sentence. "Let us be honest," he said. "If Maya Carter were not Robert Carter's daughter, no one would care." This was not bravery, it was theatrics. She canceled a $750 million deal to make a statement about pride. Who pays the employees who lose their jobs because of that? Another guest nodded. "Exactly. It is easy to act moral when your last name protects you from consequences." A third guest interrupted. "No, she acted because someone had to. Every major scandal starts the same way, with someone saying it was just a joke. She exposed that cycle." The host smirked. "Or exploited it." Maya watched for a moment longer, then placed the tablet down. Her tone stayed calm. "They are not wrong about one thing. I am protected by privilege. But privilege is not the problem. Pretending not to have it is." Nia nodded slowly. "So what do we do?" "Nothing," Maya replied. "Let them talk. Truth does not compete with commentary." Huh. At that same hour, Evelyn Shaw was on a video call with a journalist from The Atlantic. She had become an accidental figure of her own, the first witness, as the headlines called her. Her voice trembled slightly, but her words were clear. "People keep asking me if I am afraid of losing opportunities because I spoke up. But I already lost enough by staying quiet in the past. I am done being afraid." The interview went viral within hours. The country was now divided not between left and right, but between those who believed silence was strength and those who saw it as complicity. In the Carter home, Robert watched the news quietly while stirring his coffee. The television glowed across the living room, cycling between praise and outrage. "We have become the conversation," he said. Maya stood near the window, her reflection overlapping with the skyline. "Then we have done our job," she replied. "Because conversations are how systems crack." Robert smiled faintly. "You sound more like your mother every day." There was a pause, one filled with memory. Maya's mother, Serena Carter, had passed away years earlier, long before the company reached its global status. She had been the quiet heart of every success and the unspoken strength behind Robert's composure. "She would have been proud of you," he said softly. Maya looked down, her voice almost a whisper. "She taught me that silence is not the absence of sound, it is the presence of control." Outside, rain began to fall, a fine mist over the lake that turned the surface into silver dust. The city lights blurred through it, like a painting melting under its own colors. At the Bennett estate, the same rain hit the windows like tiny verdicts. Richard Bennett sat alone in his study, reading yet another headline that used his family's name as a warning: "The Fall of the Untouchables." His phone rang continuously, but he did not answer. The humiliation was too heavy, too public, too deserved. In another room, Eleanor was recording a second apology, this time for a television interview. Her voice cracked between sentences, rehearsed remorse fighting real panic. The producer whispered, "That line again, with more sincerity." She closed her eyes, unable to tell which part of her felt less real, the arrogance that caused the fall or the shame that followed it. By midnight, the world had chosen its sides. Online petitions demanded the Bennetts step down from corporate boards. Others demanded that Carter Industries face scrutiny for its influence. The internet had turned morality into a market. Maya knew it would not last forever. Public outrage was a storm, intense but temporary. Yet she also knew storms leave residue. Things never looked the same afterward. Before she went to bed, she sent one final message to Nia. "Tomorrow, schedule a press conference. Noon. I will speak not to defend myself, but to define what silence means." Nia's reply came seconds later. "Understood. Shall I inform your father?" Maya typed back. "He already knows. He raised me for this." The night deepened, thunder rolled over the lake, and the lights of Seattle flickered under the storm. But inside her room, Maya Carter slept soundly, knowing that in the morning, the world would not just hear her voice, it would finally understand her quiet. By noon the next day, the press conference room at Carter Industries looked more like a courtroom than a corporate space. Rows of cameras lined the back wall, their red lights blinking in unison like watchful eyes. Journalists filled every seat, microphones pressed forward, pens poised. Outside, a crowd of supporters gathered behind barricades, holding signs that read, "Dignity has no price," and "Silence speaks truth." For 48 hours, the world had been waiting for Maya Carter to speak. She had become a symbol too quickly, too perfectly for people to understand her as a person. Some saw her as the voice of modern integrity, others as a wealthy woman turning morality into spectacle. But in the boardroom above, she was still just Maya, composed, calm, and deliberate. Nia Thompson stood by the door, whispering updates. "All major networks are live. The feed is global. Your father is already watching from his office." Maya adjusted the cuffs of her black blazer, her reflection framed by the glass wall behind her. She looked neither nervous nor proud, just steady. "We are not defending ourselves today," she said quietly. "We are clarifying what silence means." Nia nodded. "They will expect a speech. They will get a mirror." At exactly 12 o'clock, the room fell silent as Maya stepped up to the podium. The hum of cameras softened into stillness. The only sound was the soft rhythm of her heels crossing the floor. She placed her notes on the podium but did not look at them. Her eyes met the crowd instead, reporters, executives, employees, and strangers watching history form in real time. "Good afternoon," she began. Her voice was clear, low, and unshaken. "In the past few days, a single moment has been stretched across the world. People have debated it, defended it, and defined it. I would like to tell you what it truly was." She paused long enough for the words to settle. "At the Bennett Gala, I was insulted. That is not news. It is history repeating itself. What made it news was not the insult, but the silence that followed it." A few journalists shifted in their seats, pens scratching. I did not raise my voice that night. I did not demand an apology. I made a phone call. That call was not revenge, it was recognition. Recognition that dignity is not something you negotiate, it is something you protect. The room was still. Even the camera operators seemed to forget their movements. I have heard people say I overreacted, that I let emotion destroy a $750 million deal. But what they call emotion, I call memory. And memory has a cost. My father once told me, "When they think you belong to the background, that is when you remind them who built the stage." Last night, I remembered that. A flashbulb went off. She did not flinch. I am not asking for admiration. I am asking for acknowledgement. Because silence, when chosen, is not surrender, it is strength. It is how you let arrogance reveal itself without help. A murmur moved through the crowd. Not disagreement, but awe. In our world of power and privilege, it is easy to think control comes from volume. But control, real control, is knowing when to say nothing and let consequence speak. That is what happened that night. I did not destroy a deal. I uncovered what it was built on. She let the pause breathe again. Then she continued, softer now. "To the Bennetts, I wish no ruin. I wish reflection. What you lost was not money, it was illusion. To those watching who have faced something similar and stayed quiet, understand this. Silence is not the absence of courage, it is the patience of justice. A ripple of clicking cameras filled the room. Maya looked across the audience, then directly into one of the cameras. This story was never about one family or one deal. It is about every moment someone was told they did not belong in a place they helped create. If my silence made that visible, then I have spoken louder than I ever needed to. She closed her folder, signaling the end. Thank you. The room remained quiet for several seconds before applause broke not loud, but sincere, respectful, almost reverent. Afterward, as she stepped away from the podium, a journalist from the Washington Post called out, "Miss Carter, would you take questions?" She turned, smiled politely. "No questions today. The answers are already in the silence." Outside, the crowd erupted in cheers as the glass doors opened. Reporters rushed to relay her words. Hashtags multiplied. Networks replayed the speech in slow motion. Within an hour, every outlet called it the Quiet Revolution Address. Inside his office, Robert Carter watched the broadcast alone. The corners of his mouth lifted into a proud, silent smile. He reached for the framed photograph on his desk, a picture of Maya at 12 years old, standing beside him at her first company event. "You finally learned when to speak," he murmured, "and you did it without raising your voice." At that same moment, across the city, Richard Bennett watched the same broadcast from his darkened office. The sound echoed against the glass walls like judgment. When Maya said, "I wish no ruin, I wish reflection," his reflection in the window looked back at him with something close to regret. Eleanor Bennett stood behind him, arms folded, mascara smudged from sleepless nights. "She will forgive herself for what she did to us," she said coldly. Richard shook his head slowly. "She does not need forgiveness. She never wronged us. We wronged ourselves." The words hung in the air like smoke, too late to clear. That night, the video of Maya's speech surpassed 10 million views. Students quoted it. Journalists dissected it. Leaders shared it. And for once, the world did not talk about the noise of power, but the silence that redefined it. Somewhere near the lake, under the pale light of the moon, Maya stood on her balcony again, watching the water ripple in the wind. She thought of the little girl in the hotel lobby all those years ago, waiting outside for permission to exist. "She is gone," Maya whispered to herself. She walked inside, and this time, the world followed her in. For the first time in weeks, the world seemed to exhale. The outrage had burned itself into quiet, leaving behind something heavier: understanding. Maya Carter's speech had done what few corporate statements ever could. It had turned a scandal into a mirror. The internet had stopped shouting long enough to listen. Across major cities, her words were replayed in classrooms, in newsrooms, in company workshops. Professors called it the ethics pivot. Activists called it the speech that reset power. But to Maya, it was simply an act of alignment between who she was and what the world had forced her to become. That evening, as the sunset bled gold over Lake Washington, she stood alone in her father's office. The glass walls glowed with the reflection of the skyline. The world was watching her from afar, but up here, all she heard was the hum of the city and the faint rhythm of her own heartbeat. Robert Carter entered quietly, placing a folder on the desk. "The first round of applications for the mentorship program are in," he said. 2,000 submissions in 24 hours. Maya turned toward him, the soft light tracing her profile. 2,000 stories, she murmured, all waiting to be heard. Her father nodded. "You gave them that voice. It is not the kind of power we measure in dollars." She smiled slightly. "It is the only kind that lasts." For a moment, they stood in silence, father and daughter, generations apart yet built from the same calm defiance. Robert broke it first. "Do you know what I remember most from your speech?" "What?" "When you said, 'Silence is the patience of justice,' that is what your mother used to say to me when I wanted to fight back. I never told you that before." Maya's breath caught for half a second. "She said that?" He nodded. "She lived it. Your mother believed that dignity was louder than revenge. She would be proud of what you did." Maya turned her gaze to the horizon, eyes glistening but steady. "Then I hope she was listening." Downstairs, the Carter Industries lobby buzzed with the rhythm of a company reborn. Employees who had spent years behind desks now spoke of their workplace with pride. The receptionist, the janitor, the junior engineer all felt they were part of something more than a corporation. It was not just business anymore, it was belonging. But with admiration came attention, and with attention came scrutiny. Across the country, television networks debated her every sentence. Was she too composed, too strategic, too perfect to be real? Analysts dissected her gestures, her pauses, her tone. Some said her silence was calculated, others said it was instinct. And then came the question that divided everything again. What comes next? Because silence, however powerful, invites curiosity, and curiosity can turn into obsession. In the following days, invitations flooded in. The United Nations wanted her to speak at a summit on equality. A major university offered her an honorary doctorate. Fashion magazines wanted to feature her on their covers as the face of modern leadership. She declined them all. When Nia brought her a stack of invitations one morning, Maya simply said, "Every platform wants to turn pain into profit. I will not be their story to sell." Nia smiled, understanding. "So what will you do instead?" "I will build something that outlives applause," Maya replied. That same afternoon, Maya visited the construction site of a new Carter Industries facility. It was a training hub for young engineers and entrepreneurs, part of the mentorship initiative she and Marcus had launched. The workers greeted her with awe, not because of her fame, but because she had kept her word. Marcus met her at the entrance, wearing a yellow hard hat and a proud grin. "We are ahead of schedule," he said. "The first orientation starts next week." She nodded approvingly. "Let us make sure this place feels like possibility, not charity." He chuckled. "That is already happening. One of the interns told me this morning, I am not here because I need a job. I am here because someone finally built a door." Maya's expression softened. "Then let us hold it open." As she walked through the unfinished hallways, the air smelled of new beginnings, fresh paint, sawdust, ambition. For the first time since the gala, she felt something close to peace. But peace rarely lasts without being tested. That evening, while driving home, her phone buzzed with an alert. She ignored it at first. Another message followed, then another. Nia's name flashed on the screen. "You need to see this." Maya pulled over, parked near the lake, and opened the link. It led to a leaked video. The footage showed a closed-door meeting at Bennett Holdings, recorded secretly. The camera was shaky, but the voices were clear. Eleanor Bennett's voice cut through the static. "Do you think I am finished? She humiliated us, and the world rewarded her for it. I will not live the rest of my life as the villain in her story." Another voice, Austin's, answered bitterly, "What are you going to do?" "Expose her," Eleanor said. "Every empire has a flaw. Let us find hers." The video ended abruptly, but the damage was already spreading online. Commentators speculated, headlines screamed, "Bennett family plans retaliation." Maya sat in her car, the glow of the screen reflecting off her calm but unreadable face. She took a slow breath, then whispered to herself, "So this is what silence invites echoes." Her phone rang again. It was her father. "I saw the video," he said. "Do not let them pull you into noise." "I will not," she said. "But they are coming." "Then let them," Robert replied. "You already taught the world what to do with arrogance. Now show them what to do with desperation." She hung up, watching the city lights ripple on the water. For a long time, she said nothing. Then, finally, she spoke to the quiet. "They never learned," she whispered. "But they will." The night closed around her, calm but charged. Somewhere out there, the Bennetts were plotting. Somewhere else, the world was still watching. And in the space between them, Maya Carter prepared for the next chapter where silence would not just defend her, it would define her again. Morning returned to Seattle with the smell of rain and the promise of tension. The city skyline gleamed beneath a pale sky, its glass towers shimmering like they knew a storm was coming. Inside Carter Industries, the atmosphere was calm on the surface but restless underneath. Everyone had seen the leaked Bennett video. No one dared mention it aloud. In her office, Maya Carter sat by the window, watching a single drop of rain crawl down the glass. Her desk was covered with blueprints for the mentorship hub, but her focus had been stolen by the quiet unease around her. The calm before confrontation always had a certain sound, a hum, a pause, the collective breath of people waiting for the next headline. Her phone vibrated once, then twice. Unknown number. She hesitated for half a second before answering. Maya Carter. The voice on the other end was low, female. deliberate. Miss Carter, this is Angela Weiss, senior correspondent from the National Ledger. I have information you should hear. Maya stayed silent. Silence was her filter. People often revealed more when you gave them space to fill it, Angela continued. I received an encrypted file this morning. It contains emails, financial transfers, and internal memos from Bennett Holdings. Someone inside their company sent it anonymously. It seems they are preparing a coordinated campaign against you, what they call Project Reclaim. It involves fabricated data and doctored correspondence, suggesting you influenced regulators to sabotage the deal. Maya exhaled slowly, not surprised but disappointed. And you are calling because? Because I believe in accuracy, Angela said. If they are planning a lie, I want the truth before they release it. I am sending you the file. You should prepare. The line went silent for a moment before the journalist added softly, And Miss Carter, off the record, thank you. My daughter is 12. She watched your speech twice. The call ended. Maya opened her email. Within seconds, a file labeled Bennett Archive appeared. She clicked it open. Inside were dozens of messages, timelines, drafts, and payments routed through private accounts. Eleanor Bennett's name appeared repeatedly. One memo stood out. Objective: reframe Carter narrative as privileged aggression. Portray silence as manipulation. Secure allies in media to control interpretation. Maya leaned back in her chair, eyes on the ceiling. She had expected retaliation, but not one crafted with such precision. This was no emotional backlash. It was an operation. A knock on the door interrupted her thoughts. It was Nia holding a tablet. You saw it, didn't you? Maya nodded. They are trying to rewrite what happened. Nia's jaw tightened. Do we respond publicly? Not yet, Maya said. They are expecting noise. Let us give them evidence instead. She forwarded the file to her father. Within minutes, her phone buzzed again. Robert Carter's voice came through, steady but hard. This is criminal. They are manufacturing false documents to destroy you. I will have the legal team file injunctions by noon. Wait, Maya said quietly. Let us see what they do first. Exposure is more powerful when they think they are winning. Robert paused, then sighed. Your mother would call that dangerous patience. She would call it strategy, Maya replied. By midday, whispers of Project Reclaim had already leaked to the press. The Bennett's allies began dropping hints online, suggesting new evidence would emerge, proving the Carter family orchestrated the gala as a publicity stunt. Talk shows speculated wildly, corporate rivals smirked, and hashtags began to tilt. Inside Carter Industries, employees gathered around screens, scrolling through headlines with uneasy glances. The story had shifted again, like a tide pulled by hidden gravity. Maya walked into the press department, her presence turning heads instantly. No statements, she said firmly. No tweets, no press releases, not one word. Marissa Blake, the public relations head, looked bewildered. Miss Carter, they are painting you as a manipulator. If we do not respond, we look guilty. Maya met her gaze. Truth does not panic. They are lighting matches in a rainstorm. Let them burn their fingers. At 3 o'clock, Angela Weiss called again. They are planning a release tonight, 7 p.m. Eastern. It will look convincing, but the metadata in their files is sloppy. The timestamps reveal edits made last week, not last month as they claim. I am publishing that detail first. Do it, Maya said simply. That evening, the storm finally broke, literally and metaphorically. Rain hammered against office windows as the Bennett's evidence hit every major platform. Screens lit up with headlines. New documents question Maya Carter's integrity. Commentators rushed to interpret. The noise returned, louder than ever. But within 10 minutes, Angela's exposé followed. Her article was meticulous, undeniable. It revealed every forged line, every altered date, every attempt to deceive. The proof was irrefutable. The Bennetts had orchestrated a smear campaign and failed. By 8 o'clock, their credibility was collapsing again. Investors pulled funding, partners withdrew. The empire that had stood for half a century was crumbling under its own lies. In her office, Maya watched the news coverage quietly. The rain outside softened, like the storm itself was conceding. Nia entered, holding a cup of tea. You did not even have to move, she said. Maya smiled faintly. That is the point. Nia hesitated. What will you do now? Maya looked toward the window, the city reflected in her eyes. Nothing loud, Just finish what we started. Build something clean where corruption once stood. Across town, the Bennetts sat in their mansion, surrounded by silence of a different kind, the silence of disgrace. Eleanor stared at the blank television screen, whispering, "How did she do it again?" She said nothing, and the world listened. Richard closed his eyes. Because she does not fight noise with noise. She fights it with proof. Back at Carter Industries, Robert called his daughter one last time that night. "It is over," he said. "No," Maya answered softly. "It has only just begun." She turned off the lights, leaving only the glow of the city behind her. Outside, the rain slowed to a whisper, as if the world itself had learned to listen again. Tomorrow would bring another headline, another conversation, another test. But for tonight, Maya Carter let the quiet have its victory unhurried, unshaken, and absolute. The next morning broke clean and silver over Seattle, the kind of morning that makes the city look newly made. Sunlight spilled through the glass walls of Carter Industries, landing in long golden streaks across polished floors. But beneath that calm gleam was exhaustion, the collective kind that follows days of watching truth fight for breath. Maya Carter arrived early, long before the offices filled. She walked the quiet hallways, passing portraits of innovation and progress, reminders of what her father had built. The headlines outside had already shifted again. Bennett scandal deepens forgery confirmed. Maya Carter proven right. Silence wins again. Oh. She should have felt vindicated, but victory often carried its own loneliness. When she entered the boardroom, Robert Carter was already there. He sat near the window, coffee untouched, his eyes tracing the horizon. "You did not sleep either," she said softly. He smiled faintly. "Sleep is a privilege when the world insists on testing your principles." Maya took a seat beside him, setting her phone on the table face down. "The noise will fade, but the silence after it always feels heavier." Robert nodded, studying her face. "That heaviness is called consequence. It means your actions matter." The words landed gently, but with truth. They sat without speaking for a while, listening to the low hum of the city. Then Nia entered, carrying a folder. "We have a situation," she said quietly. Maya straightened. "What kind of situation?" Nia hesitated. "A man from Bennett Holdings contacted our legal department anonymously. He claims to have internal recordings proof that the family ordered the forgeries. He wants to meet you in person." Robert frowned. "That sounds like bait." "Perhaps," Nia said, "but he offered details no one else could know. Meeting him might end this once and for all." Maya glanced toward the window, her reflection framed by light. "Where and when?" "He suggested tonight," Nia replied. 9 o'clock, a cafe near the waterfront." Robert leaned forward. "You should not go alone." "I will not," Maya said. "Nia, you come with me. If it is legitimate, we will handle it carefully. If it is a trap, we will handle it quietly." The rest of the day unfolded in fragments, phone calls, interviews, congratulations from leaders she barely knew. None of it registered. The real conversation was waiting for the night. By 9 o'clock, the cafe by the waterfront was half empty, filled with the low hum of jazz and the faint scent of roasted coffee. Rain tapped gently on the windows, soft enough to hide secrets. Maya and Nia entered quietly, dressed in muted tones. They spotted a man sitting in the corner, his back to the wall, a folder resting beside his cup. He looked to be in his 40s, pale and tired, with the worn posture of someone carrying too much truth. He stood when they approached. "Miss Carter, Miss Thompson, thank you for coming." Maya sat across from him. "You said you worked for the Bennetts." "I did," he said. "My name is Daniel Ross. I was their communications strategist. I wrote the drafts for Project Reclaim. I also recorded every meeting where they discussed it." Nia's eyes narrowed. "Why come forward now?" Daniel looked down at his hands. "Because I believed them. I thought it was about protecting a legacy. Then I saw what they were willing to destroy to do it." He slid the folder across the table. "These are the recordings. Copies are in safe storage. The files show intent, names, dates, instructions. I am not proud of my part in it." Maya did not touch the folder immediately. "What do you want in return?" "Nothing," he said quickly. "I just want to be done with them. And I want you to know you were never their target. You were their mirror. They hated what they saw." For a moment, the sound of the rain was the only thing between them. Maya finally reached for the folder, opening it slowly. Inside were printed transcripts, each line colder than the next. She read one aloud under her breath. Create plausible evidence of corruption, discredit public sympathy, leak controlled scandal. She closed it gently. This ends tonight. Daniel nodded. They will know I came to you. Be ready for backlash. Maya looked up. Backlash is just proof that truth is landing. They left the cafe quietly. Outside, the rain had stopped. The city lights shimmered on the wet pavement, reflecting like shards of gold and glass. As they walked to the car, Nia asked, "What will you do with this?" "Not what they expect," Maya said. "They wanted me to react. I will respond with precision." By the time she returned home, it was almost midnight. She placed the folder on her desk and turned off her phone. Her father's light was still on across the hall. She knew he would not sleep until she told him what happened. When she stepped into his office, he looked up instantly. "Safe?" he asked. "Yes," she said, "and we have everything we need." Robert rose from his chair. "Then tomorrow, we give them their silence back, but this time, it will have teeth." He poured 2 glasses of water, one for her, one for himself. "You understand what happens after this?" Maya nodded. "Once we release proof, they will lose everything." "And what will you gain?" he asked. She paused, her voice steady. "Peace. Maybe not for them, but for the truth." Robert studied her for a moment, then raised his glass slightly. "To peace, then. Earned the hard way." They drank quietly. Outside, dawn began to touch the edge of the sky, turning the darkness into muted silver. Maya looked out at the horizon, where light met water. She whispered, "Tomorrow, they will hear silence differently." Oh, because by tomorrow evening, the truth would no longer whisper, it would roar through every channel that once carried their lies. And this time, Maya Carter would not have to say a single word. Morning came without ceremony, gray and heavy, as if the sky itself was bracing for impact. News vans began to cluster outside the Carter Industries tower before sunrise, their satellite dishes tilting upward like restless birds. Something was coming, everyone could feel it, but no one yet knew what form the truth would take. In her office, Maya Carter stood at the edge of the glass wall, watching the city wake beneath a thin veil of fog. On her desk, the folder Daniel Ross had given her lay open beside a steaming cup of untouched coffee. Pages filled with proof emails, transcripts, audio summaries stared back at her like ghosts of arrogance. Robert Carter entered quietly, his expression composed but his eyes alert. "The legal team is ready," he said. "The press conference is set for 11 o'clock. Once we release this, the Bennetts will have nowhere to hide." Maya turned toward him, her voice steady. "It is not about hiding, Dad. It is about showing the world what power looks like when it fears losing its reflection." Robert studied her for a moment, pride softening the steel in his gaze. "Your mother would have said the same thing." Maya smiled faintly. "Then let us finish this for her." By 10 o'clock, the conference room was a battlefield disguised in professionalism. Rows of journalists filled the seats, their cameras aimed, their microphones armed. The buzz of anticipation thickened the air. Nia stood near the side door, phone in hand, coordinating with the legal team and digital department. At exactly 11 o'clock, Maya walked in. The murmurs died instantly. She placed a single flash drive on the podium, its surface reflecting the lights like a small piece of evidence carved from destiny. She began without preamble. "Good morning. A few weeks ago, I said that silence is the patience of justice. Today, that patience has matured." She paused, letting the words ripple across the room. Inside this drive is a collection of verified communications from Bennett Holdings, records that prove deliberate forgery, manipulation of data, and organized deceit against Carter Industries and against me personally. These are not accusations, these are their own words. The journalists shifted forward, the click of cameras echoing like rainfall. Maya continued. "You have all witnessed how narratives can be twisted, how those in power can attempt to rewrite history in real time. This is what happens when silence refuses to bow to intimidation." Behind her, a large screen illuminated the first transcript. Eleanor Bennett's name appeared at the top of the document, followed by her words, "Make it look authentic. Use her calm against her. The public will believe a storm more than still water." A gasp moved through the room. The recording played next. Eleanor's voice, clear and cold, filled the air. "Destroy her credibility. Frame her as privileged rage in disguise." Maya let the audio play in full, then turned back to the audience. That was recorded by a member of their own team. He risked his safety to reveal what many refuse to admit. Truth does not always shout. Sometimes it whispers in evidence. At that moment, Nia signaled. The files went live online. Within seconds, every news outlet in the country began receiving the data packets. Screens flashed headlines in real time. Bennett conspiracy exposed. Verified recordings confirm forgery operation. Maya looked around the room, her tone calm but final. You cannot buy silence. You can only rent it, and the lease always expires. Applause erupted, not the wild kind reserved for entertainment, but the reverent kind that follows revelation. Some reporters stood. Others simply lowered their cameras, realizing they were not just documenting a scandal, they were witnessing a shift. At that same moment, across the city, the Bennett's world began to fracture. In their penthouse, Eleanor Bennett watched the broadcast in disbelief. Her face drained of color as her own voice echoed back through the speakers. "Turn it off!" she shouted, but Richard did not move. He stood frozen, eyes fixed on the screen, the weight of their downfall pressing into his chest. Austin paced behind them, hands trembling. "We can sue. We can say it was edited." Richard shook his head slowly. "You cannot sue the truth." Eleanor turned on him, anger cracking through despair. "You said we could survive this." "We could have," he said quietly, "until you decided to fight honesty with deceit." The room fell silent except for the steady hum of the television. Their empire, their name was collapsing live, one revelation at a time. Back at Carter Industries, Maya finished the conference with one final sentence. The purpose of justice is not humiliation. It is correction. What happens next will not be about vengeance. It will be about rebuilding what arrogance tried to destroy. She stepped away from the podium to a wave of flashing lights, her calm more powerful than any outrage could ever be. When the conference ended, Robert met her in the hallway. "You did not just end a chapter," he said. "You rewrote the entire language of power." Maya exhaled slowly. "No, Dad. I just reminded them that silence is fluent." That afternoon, global markets trembled. Bennett Holdings stock plummeted. Major partners withdrew, citing ethical misalignment. Within hours, regulators opened investigations, freezing accounts and suspending operations. By nightfall, news outlets across the world were calling it the day the empire collapsed. In a quiet office overlooking the lake, Maya watched the reports unfold. She felt no triumph, only release. Justice was not victory, it was balance returning to where it belonged. Nia entered with a tablet, her expression mixed with relief and awe. "You have messages from world leaders, activists, even CEOs. They are calling you the future of ethical power." Maya smiled gently. "Then let them remember that the future does not shout, it listens." She walked to the window, the city lights stretching endlessly beyond. The reflection in the glass showed her standing tall, calm, unshaken. For a moment, she thought of that night at the gala, the laughter, the insult, the sound of her own voice saying, "Cancel the deal." That was the moment she had taken her place in history. And now, as the world recalibrated around her silence, Maya Carter knew that history would not forget the sound of quiet power again. By midnight, the city was still awake. Every television screen glowed with the same story. Every radio station replayed the same sentence. "You cannot buy silence. You can only rent it." The words had left Maya Carter's lips less than 12 hours ago, yet they already belonged to the world. In the calm that followed chaos, her name became the anchor. It was whispered in hallways of power, quoted by commentators, printed on magazine covers, dissected in universities. But inside Carter Industries, there was no celebration. Only quiet work, deliberate and focused, the kind that follows the end of something enormous. Maya sat alone in the top-floor conference room, the lights dimmed, the city stretching below like an ocean of reflections. The exhaustion in her eyes was hidden beneath composure. Her phone buzzed repeatedly, calls from journalists, foreign leaders, even celebrities, but she ignored them all. She needed to hear her own thoughts again before the world tried to speak for her. Robert entered silently, carrying 2 cups of tea instead of coffee. "You look like you have not blinked in hours," he said, placing 1 cup in front of her. "I am afraid if I blink," she replied softly, "the noise will start again." He took a seat beside her, glancing at the silent city. "Noise always starts again, Maya, but that is why silence must last longer." For a long moment, they said nothing. The air between them felt like the pause between waves. Finally, Maya broke the silence. "Do you ever wonder," she asked, "if we were meant to carry this kind of weight? This responsibility of proving decency still exists?" Robert smiled gently. "People like us do not choose the weight. We are chosen by the imbalance. When others make noise, someone must restore rhythm." Maya nodded slowly. "It feels like standing in the center of a storm, calm on the inside, chaos circling around. That is exactly where leaders stand," Robert said. "Not outside the storm, not above it, but inside where control begins." Down below, the lake shimmered with streaks of silver light. From this height, the city looked peaceful, as if unaware that a legacy had just crumbled beneath its skyline. But the world outside was shifting. In New York, financial analysts called the Bennett downfall a masterclass in accountability. In London, newspapers named Maya the woman who redefined power. And in Johannesburg, a mural began to appear overnight, her silhouette against a backdrop of gold, captioned with her words, "Dignity does not negotiate." The impact was bigger than business. It had become cultural. Robert turned toward her. "They will want you to speak again soon. The world will ask what comes next." Maya looked at her reflection in the glass. "And what will I tell them?" "Tell them what silence has taught you," he said. She thought for a moment, then spoke softly. "That silence is not peace. It is preparation." He smiled, proud and tired. "Then you already know the answer." Outside, thunder rolled faintly over the water. The sound was distant but steady, a reminder that storms never truly end, they just change shape. Maya stood, walking toward the glass wall, her palm resting lightly against the cool surface. "They think this story is about revenge," she said, "but it was never that. It was about remembering who deserves the microphone and who needs to learn to listen." Robert joined her, his voice low. "Then say that when the time comes, the world has a short memory, but repetition is how truth survives." Maya turned her head slightly, a faint smile crossing her face. "Then I will make sure it remembers." The clock struck 1. The city lights blinked like scattered stars. Inside the tower, father and daughter stood together in quiet defiance, two figures framed by glass, looking down at a world they had just forced to hear itself. The storm outside began to fade, but the stillness inside remained. It was not the end of the story, only the center of it, the pause between the fall of arrogance and the rise of accountability. And in that stillness, Maya Carter finally closed her eyes, not to rest, but to remember the sound of silence winning. The following morning felt different. The world was still buzzing, but this time the noise carried purpose instead of panic. The air outside Carter Industries had changed. Even the reporters stationed at the entrance spoke with a kind of reverence instead of frenzy. What had started as a scandal was now a movement. Inside the building, screens displayed global reactions, articles, interviews, and op-eds from every corner of the world. The phrase, "the Carter Standard," had become shorthand for corporate ethics. Business schools were already rewriting case studies to include her speech. Activists quoted her. Politicians pretended to have always agreed with her. Maya Carter watched it all in silence from her office window. The city below moved as usual traffic, commuters, ordinary life, but she could feel the shift underneath. Power itself had changed its posture. Nia entered with her usual calm efficiency, carrying a folder full of reports. "You need to see this," she said. Maya turned. "More headlines?" "No," Nia said, handing her the folder. "Results. Government agencies have launched official investigations into Bennett Holdings. Regulators in 3 countries are freezing their accounts. Their board of directors resigned this morning." Maya skimmed through the pages, her eyes tracing the names, the signatures, the final admissions. "Justice is a slow writer," she said quietly, "but it never forgets its pen." Robert Carter appeared at the door just as she said it, his face carrying the quiet satisfaction of a man who had seen storms before and knew what clear skies meant. "You sound like your mother again," he said softly. "She used to say the same thing about truth." Maya smiled faintly. "Then maybe this is her voice speaking through me." He nodded once, stepping closer. "The system is responding faster than I expected. Every department that ignored discrimination for years is suddenly rewriting their policies. Even the stock exchange announced a new diversity compliance regulation this morning." "It should not have taken humiliation to make that happen," Maya said. "No," Robert agreed. "But sometimes systems only wake up when someone shakes the ground." They shared a look, a mixture of pride, relief, and quiet fatigue. Then Nia's phone buzzed. She glanced at the screen and frowned. "Miss Carter, you might want to see this." She handed the phone over. On the live news broadcast, an anchor was reporting breaking news. Eleanor Bennett had been taken into custody for obstruction and falsification of evidence. The footage showed Eleanor stepping out of her mansion surrounded by agents. Her once perfect composure had vanished, replaced by a hollow stare that did not recognize the world anymore. Robert watched the screen silent. "I do not take joy in this," he said. "Neither do I," Maya answered, "but I take peace in knowing the truth did not need to scream to be heard." Nia exhaled. "What do we do now? The media will ask for your reaction. They will want another speech." Maya thought for a long moment before replying. "Tell them this justice is not a press event. It is a process, and processes do not need commentary." Robert smiled. Spoken like someone who has already moved past the noise. Ugh. Maya looked back toward the city, the morning light glinting across the lake. "The world needed to see what happens when arrogance meets accountability," she said softly. "Now it needs to learn what rebuilding looks like." Nia nodded. "The mentorship program opens next week. You could make that your next statement action, not words." Maya's lips curved slightly. "Exactly. Let the next headline read, 'From Scandal to Structure.'" She turned toward her father. "Do you ever wonder if silence can build as much as it destroys?" Robert's eyes softened. "It can. It built this family, this company, and now it is rebuilding faith." For the first time in days, Maya laughed, a quiet, genuine sound that filled the office like sunlight breaking through clouds. Outside, the streets of Seattle reflected a kind of ordinary peace again, but underneath that calm was something extraordinary. The system had shifted. The old rules had cracked. And in the space where noise once ruled, silence had written a new order, one that did not ask permission to exist. Maya Carter turned from the window, her voice almost a whisper. "It is done," she said. "The rest will follow." And for the first time since that night at the gala, she felt light not because she had won, but because the world had finally begun to listen on its own. The week after the collapse of Bennett Holdings was strangely quiet. The noise of the media had dulled into analysis, the outrage into reflection. What remained was the echo, the lingering awareness that something irreversible had happened. People no longer spoke about the scandal. They spoke about the standard. Carter Industries became the epicenter of that new conversation. For some, it was inspiration. For others, intimidation. Every boardroom in America suddenly wanted to know how to do things the Carter way, but few truly understood what that meant. It was not policy, it was posture. Maya Carter understood that better than anyone. On a cold Wednesday morning, she walked through the new mentorship center, 3 stories of glass, light, and purpose. Construction dust still floated in the air. The walls were lined with murals of innovators and activists, each chosen to remind the next generation that vision requires courage. Workers nodded respectfully as she passed, their faces lit with quiet admiration. Marcus Hale was waiting for her near the entrance, holding a clipboard and his usual confident grin. "We are ready for opening day," he said. 160, 2 mentees confirmed. Every single one from communities people usually overlook. Maya smiled. "Good. This is where the story turns." He hesitated before speaking again. "You know, people keep calling this place your redemption arc." She raised an eyebrow. "Redemption from what?" "From being right," he said. "They are not used to power that does not need forgiveness." Maya's laugh was soft, thoughtful. "Then let us show them that clarity does not require apology." They continued their walk through the building. Every detail reflected intention, from the inclusive artwork to the open learning spaces that replaced traditional offices. It was not just architecture. It was a philosophy made tangible. By noon, she returned to headquarters. Nia met her in the lobby, her expression more serious than usual. "There is something you need to see," she said. They entered Maya's office. On the large monitor was a video message recorded, polished, and released just minutes earlier. It was from Claire Bennett, Eleanor's daughter. "Miss Carter," Claire began, her voice trembling slightly. "You do not know me well, but I was there that night. I laughed when my mother insulted you. I did not stop her. I did not defend you. And I have lived every day since wishing I had." Maya's face remained still, but her eyes softened. Claire continued, "The world sees my family as villains now. Maybe we earned that. But I wanted you to know I am not speaking to protect our name. I am speaking because I finally understand what silence means. That night, I mistook your calm for pride. Now I know it was power. I am sorry I learned it too late. Ugh. The message ended, fading into the Carter Industries logo as news outlets began replaying it immediately. Nia turned toward Maya. Do you believe her? Maya sat back, thinking. Yes, because guilt rarely seeks applause. It just seeks air. Robert entered moments later, having seen the same broadcast. That girl may have done more for her family's legacy in 1 minute than her parents did in a lifetime. Maya nodded slowly. And maybe that is the point. The world does not change because the guilty are punished. It changes because the next generation refuses to repeat them. For a moment, none of them spoke. Outside the window, the city moved in rhythm again, steady, unhurried, alive. Robert placed a hand on his daughter's shoulder. You gave them space to wake up. That is what true leadership does. It does not crush. It clarifies. Maya looked out over the skyline, her voice barely above a whisper. Clarity always costs something, but this time the price was worth it. She stood, straightened her jacket, and turned toward Nia. Send a message to Claire Bennett. Tell her, thank you for speaking when it was not convenient. The world needs more of that. Nia smiled. Yes, Miss Carter. As Maya watched the lake shimmer under the pale afternoon sun, she realized the story had entered its final phase. Not revenge, not rivalry, but restoration. In the end, silence had not just broken arrogance, it had built reflection. And in that reflection, the world was finally learning how to see. 2 weeks later, the city had settled into its new rhythm. The Bennett name had become a case study, and the Carter name had become a compass. Schools taught the story as ethics in action. Companies dissected it as a business lesson. But for Maya Carter, life had become something quieter, something closer to balance. That morning, she arrived at the mentorship center for the official opening ceremony. A soft drizzle painted the pavement, and hundreds of people gathered beneath a canopy of white banners printed with one simple phrase, "Build what outlives you." The air carried that rare mix of pride and humility that comes only after justice is done. Maya walked onto the stage in a dark navy suit. She looked out at the crowd, students, teachers, journalists, even construction workers who had helped build the place. Among them were faces she did not know but somehow recognized. People who had been waiting their whole lives for permission to believe they belonged. Robert Carter stood in the front row. His eyes said everything words did not need to. When the applause faded, Maya stepped to the microphone. She spoke without notes, her voice steady but gentle. 2 months ago, this city watched a deal collapse. But what really fell that night was not a contract, it was a ceiling. Today, we build something in its place. The audience leaned in, drawn to the gravity in her calm. This center exists because silence can do more than end injustice. It can build opportunity. Every young person who walks through these doors deserves to know that their dignity is not a favor, it is a fact. This building is proof of that. Applause rose again, strong and sustained. Cameras flashed, but she did not play to them. She was speaking to something older than headlines. After the ceremony, she walked the hallways surrounded by the first group of mentees. One of them, a teenage girl named Harper, hesitated before asking, Miss Carter, can I ask you something? Maya smiled. Of course. Were you scared that night, when they said those things to you? Maya paused, meeting the girl's eyes. Yes, she said softly. But fear is not the enemy. Silence is. Because silence without purpose is surrender, but silence with purpose. She placed a hand gently on the girl's shoulder. That is strategy. The girl nodded slowly, her expression shifting from uncertainty to quiet determination. Later that afternoon, after the crowds had left and the journalists had filed their stories, Maya stayed behind. The building was finally still. Sunlight slipped through the glass walls, landing on the inscription etched into the main atrium wall. Integrity is louder than pride. She stood there for a long time, listening to the echo of her own footsteps, until she heard a familiar voice behind her. You have turned silence into an empire, Robert said softly, stepping into the light. She smiled faintly. Not an empire, Dad. A foundation. Empires crumble. Foundations last. He nodded approvingly. You sound like your mother again. Maya looked at him, her eyes filled with something gentle but unyielding. I think she has been speaking through both of us this whole time. They walked together through the atrium, their reflections gliding along the polished floor. As they reached the doors, Nia appeared with her tablet in hand. "Miss Carter, there is something you should see," she said. "A new article from the National Ledger." Maya took the tablet. The headline read, "The woman who redefined power speaks again, and this time, she builds." The article was not sensational. It was reverent. It told the story not of victory, but of rebuilding, the kind of story that carries hope instead of drama. Robert glanced at her. "Are you ready to talk to the press again?" Maya handed the tablet back, smiling. "Not yet. The world has enough of my words. It needs to see my work." Outside, the drizzle had turned into sunlight. The banners above the courtyard swayed gently in the wind, their message catching the light. "Build what outlives you." Maya stood there for a moment, breathing in the calm. The world had shouted, doubted, attacked, and eventually listened. Now, it was her turn to move quietly again forward, deliberate, unstoppable. As she walked toward the car, Robert called out softly behind her. "You know, Maya, you never really broke the system." She turned back. "No," she said, her voice calm, her eyes bright. "I just reminded it how to listen." And with that, she stepped into the sunlight, where silence and strength had finally become the same thing. A month later, the Mentorship Center had become the heartbeat of the city. Every morning, its glass walls shimmered with sunlight, and every evening, its hallways glowed with laughter and ambition. People no longer whispered Maya Carter's name as a headline, they spoke it as an example. She had become the reference point in every conversation about leadership, power, and grace. But for Maya, the noise of fame had faded into something quieter responsibility. That morning, she sat alone in her office at the center, reviewing progress reports. Pages filled with success stories, a young inventor securing funding, a single mother launching her first tech startup, a student gaining admission to an Ivy League school. These were not just statistics. They were ripples from a moment of silence that had once shattered arrogance. Her phone buzzed. It was a message from Nia. United Nations requested a keynote. Topic: the ethics of power. Maya stared at the message for a long time, then smiled faintly. She typed her reply. "Decline politely. Let my work speak instead." Moments later, Marcus knocked and entered, carrying a folder. "We just got the annual analytics," he said with excitement. "Applications for next year have tripled. There are already international inquiries from Nairobi, Sao Paulo, and Seoul. Everyone wants to build their own version of this." "Ho." Maya closed the folder gently, a calm pride in her expression. "Then the idea worked. We did not just start a program. We started a pattern." Marcus hesitated before speaking again. "Do you ever think about them? The Bennetts?" She looked out the window toward the lake, where the light broke across the surface like liquid gold. "Sometimes," she admitted, "but not with anger, with understanding. They were not villains, they were reflections. They showed us how ugly power looks when it forgets its purpose." Marcus nodded thoughtfully. "That is what makes you different. You never needed to destroy anyone to win." Maya smiled faintly. "That is because real victory does not come from defeating others. It comes from becoming undeniable." Just then, Nia entered the room holding a thick envelope. "This just arrived from the Attorney General's office," she said, placing it on the table. "They closed the Bennett case. Final verdict. Public restitution has been paid, and all assets are liquidated to support educational grants." Maya opened the envelope and read the statement carefully. Her father had always taught her that closure is not the end, it is the clearing of space for what comes next. She placed the letter down, eyes distant but warm. "Then it is finished. Justice has finished its sentence." Nia smiled softly. "You sound relieved." "I am," Maya said, "but not because they fell, because the truth stood." She rose from her chair and walked toward the large window overlooking the city. The Mentorship Center stood in perfect symmetry below glass, light, and purpose. "When we started this," she said quietly, "I wanted to prove that silence could be strength, but now I see something greater." "What is that?" Marcus asked. "That silence can also be creation," she said. "It can build futures." Ugh. Outside, children were walking through the courtyard, laughing as they passed the mural of her mother's, quote, "Dignity is louder than pride." For the first time in years, Maya allowed herself to breathe freely, to let go of the tension she had carried since that night at the gala. Robert entered the room moments later, his presence still commanding but softened with time. "You look peaceful," he said. I am, she replied, because the world finally learned how to listen. Uh, he nodded, a small smile forming. And what about you? Have you learned how to rest? She laughed softly. I am still working on that. They stood together at the window, father and daughter, watching the world they had reshaped move forward without needing their words to guide it. Robert broke the silence. Do you know what tomorrow will bring? Maya looked out at the skyline, her reflection overlapping his. Tomorrow will bring more voices, she said. More truth, more balance, more people who will not have to raise their tone to be heard. That is all I ever wanted. Outside, the city pulsed like a living heart, steady, vibrant, alive. For the first time, Maya Carter saw her reflection not as the woman who ended a deal, but as the woman who began a dialogue. And somewhere deep inside, she understood that her silence had not just changed a story. It had changed the world's vocabulary for power. 1 year later, the world looked different. The Carter Mentorship Foundation had expanded to 5 countries, each center built on the same philosophy: dignity before dominance, purpose before profit. The story that had begun with humiliation in a marble ballroom had grown into a movement that redefined what strength looked like. Seattle's skyline gleamed brighter than ever, but it was not the buildings that changed, it was the people walking beneath them. They carried themselves differently, spoke differently, treated one another with a kind of cautious hope. In conversations across boardrooms and classrooms, one phrase had survived every translation: the Carter Standard. On a quiet Sunday morning, Maya Carter returned to the original center. The building was still and empty, its glass walls catching the early light like open hands. She walked through the atrium, fingers brushing along the marble railing, remembering the day it opened: the faces, the applause, the hope. At the far end of the hall stood a new addition, a bronze plaque embedded into the wall, surrounded by white lilies. It read, "To those who were told to stay silent, your stillness was never weakness. It was the beginning of change." She stood there for a long moment, reading it twice, as if to remind herself that this was real. Behind her, she heard the familiar sound of measured footsteps. Robert Carter appeared, older but still carrying the same quiet gravity that had guided her since childhood. He wore no suit today, only a simple gray coat, his expression softer than she had seen in years. "It feels different when it is quiet, does it not?" he asked, his voice low and calm. Maya turned, smiling faintly. "It does. The silence here feels earned." Robert looked around the vast space, his eyes glinting with quiet pride. "When I was your age, I thought power meant being the loudest in the room. Then I learned that volume fades faster than vision." She stepped closer, resting a hand on his arm. "And now? Now I know power is not what you hold," he said. "It is what you hand over. You built something that will outlive both of us." Maya exhaled slowly, the truth of his words settling deep within her. "I did not build it alone. Every person who believed when they could have stayed bitter built this with me." They walked toward the large window overlooking the courtyard. Outside, a new group of students was arriving for orientation, young men and women from every background imaginable, their faces bright with expectation. They stopped to take pictures under the inscription above the doors: "Build what outlives you." Robert watched them quietly. "Your mother would have loved this," he said. Maya's voice softened. "She is in all of it. Every word, every wall, every lesson." A gentle silence followed, filled not with emptiness but with peace. Finally, Robert said, "You know, the world still quotes your speech. That line about silence and justice, it has become a mantra." Maya smiled faintly. "Then let them quote it. But I hope they also understand it." "And what do you want them to understand?" "That silence is not the absence of sound," she said, her gaze fixed on the students below. "It is the presence of self. When you know who you are, you do not need to shout. The world adjusts its volume to hear you." Her father looked at her, pride shining in his eyes. "That may be the truest thing you have ever said." They stood together, the sun slowly filling the room with gold. The reflection in the glass showed not 2 people, but 2 generations, one who had built the foundation and one who had turned it into legacy. As the students filed inside, laughter echoed up the stairwell, blending with the hum of life returning to the building. For the first time in years, the sound felt right, balanced, whole. Maya whispered, almost to herself, "This is what silence builds." And in that moment, surrounded by light, legacy, and the quiet proof of endurance, Maya Carter finally understood She had never needed to raise her voice to change the world. She only needed to make the world quiet enough to hear the truth.